I think the rewards that you get from having a culture that you pay attention to come back, threefold. My name is Mary Turk, and I'm the managing partner of Turke Steil. We are I guess I call it a small law firm. We have about 30 total employees, including, at this point, 12 attorneys, and the rest are staff. We have an office in Madison, and we have an office in Janesville, but we also have remote working attorneys and staff.
Yeah, so my name is Emily Smit. I am a leadership coach and company culture consultant at the Perk. And the Perk works with a lot of different organizations to come in and build custom training programs or work with companies to intentionally build their cultures. Yeah, so today we're talking all about culture, which is a really robust topic. And so we started with talking about what culture is. I always like to say, how can we simplify it so we can amplify it? So we talked about the definition of culture and how it impacts a lot of different aspects of your firm. Then we talked about how to actually do it. So we brought in a different expert who is really good at measuring some of these KPIs, or what he called CPIs, culture performance indicators for your firm. And then we had somebody come in and talk about what this looks like in a real life setting for their firm.
Sure, I was asked to bring to the audience sort of an example of how I've tried to be intentional in establishing our firm culture. So I gave sort of real world example just from my own experience. I said I'm not the culture expert, but I definitely think a lot about firm culture.
So company culture is your values and beliefs manifested in the behavior of everybody at the organization. So what are the behaviors that we're doing every single day to really live out those values and those beliefs? And it's so important because, like we mentioned before, it affects every area of your organization. It affects your productivity. It affects the conversations you're having, how you communicate with one another. When you're talking about indicators, how do you get people for retention? How do you keep people? How do you have that engagement? But really what we wanted to talk about today was how culture has such an important impact on all these different areas of your firm. So understanding this so you can say, okay, how do we break this down? How do we get really clear on what behaviors we want to see here, what culture looks like here, so we can amplify that in all these different areas? Yeah, a strong company culture is hard to define because everybody's looks so different. It depends on if you have an in-person workforce or a hybrid or fully remote. It depends on the type of clients that you're working with, and most importantly, it depends on what your values are personally. And so what I would say is a strong intentional culture across the board is one that's really clearly defined, one that has the intention behind it or the why behind it. So people know what's important here, and that's been communicated. And then once that's clearly defined, that's so much easier for people to give positive reinforcement or that recognition to continue those behaviors. It's easier to give that feedback when it's behaviors that you don't like to see. And it gives people this common language. It's really hard to give some of these conversations when people don't know exactly what doesn't feel right. It just feels a little off. And so this is really helping them clearly define what's off so they can change that.
Yeah, so it's really hard to define, and I think that's a theme with culture. I had it actually for this presentation sort of distilled in my mind, like what things have I developed, whether intentionally or unintentionally, but now they're part of our culture, and sort of why. And these came to me after I worked for a larger law firm for many, many years. There's like apples and oranges comparison just because of the size. But I definitely wanted to work in an environment where we worked hard, but we also had fun. For me, that was really important because attorneys work really hard. We do really hard things. Sometimes we have successes, sometimes failures, but if you're not having fun while you're doing it, that's not a good thing. So work hard, have fun. I wanted to make sure that I was open to people that were younger, different ages, different places in their career, and particularly not having the same mold that law firms have had for our younger attorneys. I found in my previous life that they didn't want to do firms the way we did them when I was their age. So it's sort of a break from that tradition. Also respecting personal time, family time is very important. To make sure that we are gaining the loyalty of our attorneys and staff by making sure we say we value you at work, but we also value you when you are at home and spending time with your family and friends.
With a firm, some of the benefits of having a strong culture is you are able to set those clear expectations for your team. They're given a pathway to success because we all want expectations as long as they are clear and fair and consistent across the board. So getting really clear on your values or those behaviors you want to see in your culture is a great way to set those consistent expectations. Then it is easier to bring these into your annual reviews that you're having, and how are those behaviors showing up? How are those behaviors maybe lacking in some of the client interactions, and how can we have more of that presence? It's also great about like how do we live this out all together? What events do we want to put on as a firm? What benefits do we want to offer, because this is really valuable to us? So it helps you kind of define the choices that you make as a leader of a firm to decide how is this going to reinforce those values, reinforce that behavior or culture that we're looking to build. Yeah, so we did a reflection in the workshop, but the reflection was based off of where is your current state of your culture, where are you currently at, and what is your ideal state, where do you want to go? And so then once you identify where do we want to go, what do we want to see here, the questions that you can ask yourself, they may seem simple, but I think that they're really impactful, is what are those behaviors that we want to keep doing, start doing, and stop doing? And that's a great way to say, we're doing some really awesome things right now. How can we continue to infuse that into our culture? What are the behaviors now that are no longer serving us that we need to let go to get to this next level? Or what are the behaviors that are absent but we really need to infuse to our culture to get to that ideal state? So just asking yourself, where are we at right now? What is our current state? What is that gap between our current state and ideal state? And like what needs to change?
Well, it was not instantaneous, that's for sure. I think it definitely starts at the top. So I think you have to think through and make sure that most of your behaviors are signaling to everyone else how you want things to go. And I'll say as an example, like communication, making sure if you don't want to tolerate people raising their voice in the workplace or being, mean or whatever, you can't do that. Right? If you want to show people that you respect their personal time and their vacation time, you shouldn't take your computer on every vacation and come brag about how you never take vacation. That just doesn't set the tone. So it really starts at the top. So my firm has grown over the years, but when it started in 2016, it was me and a partner. And so as we grew organically, we just tried to make sure that those pieces of culture emanated throughout the group. Great question. I definitely think there's a component absolutely of top down. That said though, some of the best aspects of culture can be bottom up. And when you identify, some young people or new people to your firm that bring an idea, embrace it, and incorporate traditions from others who have said, hey, this worked really well. I ask people a lot that I meet, like, well, what do you do now that people are remote? Like, how do you bring your team together? I've stolen ideas from a ton of other people. I think asking questions and asking of your own team, like, what would you like to see us do as a group? And then implementing their ideas.
That's a great question. The hybrid workforce has really brought in a new element when it comes to culture, because we sometimes think of culture as where we're at, like the environment that we're at, but now we're in 20 different environments because we have 20 different spaces that we're working. So something that I think has really become even more prevalent when we're talking about culture is that vision or where we're going. And it's clearly defining as a whole, what are our non-negotiables? What are the things that as a firm we are agreeing to? So even when we are working at 6 a.m. before the kids go to school, or at 10 p.m. after we get done with baseball practice, whatever that looks like, that we know what things we need to be working on to move the needle. We know what success looks like for the firm, and we know what our goals are and how we play into that. So getting really clear on what is our vision, where are we headed, and then the day-to-day, people are able to kind of fill in those blanks a little bit easier because they're all working towards a common goal.
So what we do is I think you have to be even more intentional than you otherwise would because you have these people working in different locations and through different medium. I find it's translated into like, a weekly all video meeting because then everyone can participate. But we also try to be very intentional about doing in-person events more frequently where everyone's invited. Because when you've got people working remotely, it's much more important that you do see them on a regular basis in some form or fashion. I do have attorneys that work some days in the office and some days at home. But I try to have days where everyone's in the office as opposed to staggering their work schedules, because then you come into the office but you don't see, the purpose was to see people and you don't see people. So you just have to be more intentional. I think you have to be more creative. Like we have a Slack channel, love the Slack channel. Everyone uses it, it's fun. We also do business on it. Teams kind of have their own channels. And then that in-person component, you have to do it. Okay, so I think they're feeling it in that there is an unspoken code of conduct that we know how we do it at Turke Steil. And I think if you see someone not following that, it's very obvious. I wish I had exact directions for how that was created over time, but it does happen. And I think that it's not worked for every attorney or every staff member. I am not here to say I have 100% record of hiring, but when it does work, you know it. And then when people go out and recruit other attorneys, for example, I can hear them say the same things that I would want to say if I were in their shoes. I also think that the people for which this culture is a good fit, they're happier. They like their job, they like their team, they're more motivated, and that's a recipe for financial success. When you got people that really are bought in and love what they do and feel that they're doing it with people they like, that success just comes from that. I think our firm culture is evident to our clients because they feel that we like what we're doing and they feel that we're enjoying it. And believe me, not every client interaction is like a joy fest. That's not what I'm saying. But I think they sense that they enjoy where they're working and they work hard and they have pride in the firm. And I think our clients sense that, hey, this seems like a good place. I like these attorneys. Also because we hire for a certain ethos of culture, I think that translates across all the attorneys that they may meet.
Yeah, so it's really important to measure aspects of your culture so you know what's going well and what's not. So, it's something that we hear often, but using surveys that you can use with your team or just offering feedback from your team is a great way to be able to measure that change. So, for example, in our firm, every 2 weeks, we send out a burnout survey. It's us ranking the aspects of burnout and where we fall in each of those aspects. And so that's where we have a baseline and we can see what's going really well or what's something that we need to change. And that's true with your culture too. So when we get clear with some of these behaviors that are important to us, how do we measure some of those? Are you seeing these on a daily basis? Are you seeing these behaviors lived out in our client interactions? And hearing this feedback from your team, or to be the best team possible for us to operate at the best level, what do we need to keep, start, and stop doing? And then once you get that feedback, make sure that you are also communicating to your team so they continue to give this feedback. If it's never talked about again or nothing ever changes, then you're going to stop hearing from your team. So feedback is asked, but then make sure that it is also recognized when they give that feedback and communicate that to everybody else what's going to be done with it.
Okay, I think to start is they need to think through what environment do they want. I think that attorneys should probably start by asking those who already work with them to contribute. What makes us who we are? Gather ideas. You can't by yourself, I think, come up with that culture. I think you'd miss. I think you need to gather information, kind of take stock of what's working, take stock of the things that you should continue doing, things you'd like to add, and then make sure you follow through. And I love committees. We've got a party planning committee, we've got a committee for this. Bring everybody together so everyone has bought into what you're trying to do.
Like that. Any final words?
Oh gosh. Well, I've learned a lot through this process because it has made me think a lot more about the things that we're doing. But I'm also proud that we've spent time, and it's not, you have to spend money at it. It's not free, but I think the rewards that you get from having a culture that you pay attention to come back, threefold.